Hello, friends. My name is Sean Cooper. You're about to get the scoop. Let me tell you something. We are not a fearful nation. We are not a fearful people. We are not descendants from fearful people. Time and time again, we as Americans have faced trial and adversity, and we have always come out on top, stronger and better than before. Looking back through our history, we can find examples such as George Washington and his troops crossing the Delaware, featured on my shirt right here. These were men that had already been beaten by the British multiple times, and yet, when the opportunity presented itself, they took great risk, crossed the Delaware River in the middle of the night on Christmas Day, and beat the Hessians at Trenton. Look it up. You'll find some good information right there. We can look at examples such as the Civil Rights Movement, particularly the march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, this picture here. We see white, black, old, young, men, women, Christian, and Jew united together to face a common enemy, injustice. They faced it fearlessly. They faced it head on. We can look at the women's suffrage movement. The women's suffrage movement lasted from 1848 to 1920. They had to fight for decades to get their right to vote. And again, we saw unity, men and women, young and old, working together for a common cause, justice. We can look at the Navajo Code Talkers from World War II, who volunteered to serve our nation in one of its greatest times of need. They worked together. They helped create a code that would confuse the Japanese adversaries and help us win the war. And all Native Americans during that fight volunteered at a higher percentage rate than any other people group in the United States at that time. In fact, some Native First Nations gave 70% of their able-bodied men to help support the war effort. We can look at the black soldiers who volunteered for service during the Civil War. These were men who had already faced great trial and adversity during their time. They had already faced slavery and racism, and yet they volunteered to serve our nation again during one of its greatest times of need. They volunteered not just to fight the rebel enemy, but they also had to fight for equal pay with their white soldiers. And these were men who went into battle knowing that if they were captured, they would not be afforded the same rights as POWs, but would be automatically executed by their captors. And yet they went into it anyway and succeeded. We can look at Japanese Americans during World War II. Japanese Americans were stripped of their rights as Americans and placed in internment camps for the duration of the war. However, from these camps, many young men still volunteered and helped form the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, made of mostly Japanese Americans who they or their parents had been placed in these internment camps. And yet, during the course of the war, they were one of the most highly decorated units. Also, the women in these Japanese internment camps still volunteered for service in the auxiliary corps of all the armed forces. Remember this, my fellow Americans. We can win. We can do this.